Over the past few months, one post has become the go-to response whenever someone suggests bringing Quick Play back to Team Fortress 2. It's called The Definitive Guide to Why Just Add Quick Play Won't Work, written by Mastercoms. The post presents itself as a comprehensive explanation for why Quick Play can't realistically return, and in a lot of discussions, it's treated almost like the final word on the subject. To be fair, it's probably the strongest argument against bringing back Quick Play that currently exists. Mastercoms, the author of the post, is also a voice that should be taken seriously. She has a lengthy background in the community, being the creator of one of the most popular configs, and even attempted to community run Quick Play around a year ago, which is what seems to have emboldened her to create this post. But once you strip the argument down to its core assumptions, the entire case starts to fall apart. So without further ado, rather than responding to the post line by line, I'm going to narrow it down to its essential claims. The argument ultimately rests on a few key points. 1. Quick Play is fundamentally flawed because it coordinates player per player instead of globally. 2. Matchmaking systems coordinate players better because they have global information. 3. Quick Play cannot be realistically improved enough to fix these issues. 4. People should stop asking for Quick Play and instead ask for gradual improvements to casual matchmaking. The argument only really works if you grant the following assumption. A more optimized game coordinator is a better player experience. Mastercoms treats game coordination as a decisive factor when comparing these two systems, but she never justifies why, and as a result, the post almost completely sidesteps the discussion around the possible reversion to Quick Play, which is primarily rooted in player experience, historical features, and rule set comparisons. Let's go back to this assumption before we do anything else. Is this actually true for TF2? Does technical optimization make or break a play experience? Is back-end coordination more important than what the player registers while playing? I would say no, and here's why. Efficiency does not always equal quality. A game could have an engineering marvel as its game coordinator and yet be undeniably inferior if it has to sacrifice the quality of the games themselves in order to maintain that efficiency. Let me give you an example. Airports are designed with efficiency in mind. They're good at funneling large amounts of people through a limited amount of space quickly and safely as possible. But everybody who's been in one knows that the experience of being in an airport isn't exactly comfortable.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I'm in pain! I'm fucking licking! I'm licking! Call the fucking ambulance!
And that's because airports sacrifice individual comfort for overall efficiency. What works well for managing crowds often feels stressful or unpleasant as an individual. Now apply this to TF2. A perfectly optimized system might be good at filling servers or getting players from game to game, but it sort of defeats the purpose when you're left with less agency, less satisfying games, and a fragmented player base. One can demonstrate the deterioration brought on by a supposedly efficient system by looking at how casual mode has negatively impacted game modes like Payload Race, Control Points, and King of the Hill. If a supposedly efficient system results in it taking an hour to queue into Banana Bay, or the average control points map ending in less than 10 minutes, then maybe efficiency isn't what we should be striving for. In fact, an excess of efficiency can actually degrade how players interact with the game. One way this degradation manifests is through a phenomenon I call churn. As time has passed, the matchmaking system has gotten better and better at moving players around, but it's stalled at improving the games that players are placed into. When players know they can quickly be placed into another game, they have little reason to endure a stomp, help seed an empty server, or stabilize a struggling match. Instead, they leave and re-queue. The system becomes extremely good at shuffling players around, but much worse at producing stable games. If you go back and look at gameplay from the Quick Play era, you'll see that churn was much less common.
I'm just the fucking best. Jag gillar att vi har haft en sniper som hänger med sin SMG och bara har suttit on card this entire time. I can respect that.
This is because leaving meant seeding another server, or going through the browser, or waiting on Quick Play to find you another game. The old system, with all its inefficiencies and imperfections, allowed matches to be stabilized, and incentivized behavior that allowed for games to persist, so that every game mode and map could shine. Another distortion that's resulted from efficiency is that it's introduced loads of redundancy.
It's redundant. It's redundant. There's no reason to have that in the game. It's ridiculous.
The matchmaking system has become efficient enough to bypass in-game systems that were designed to regulate play. It is faster to re-queue than it is to wait for a warm-up timer or a map vote. Players can hit the re-queue button as soon as the round ends and get into another match before the map vote even starts. Instead of waiting around for a pre-round timer, players can hit the re-queue button and be sent to a more popular game faster than the timer can wind down. Under quick play, leaving meant searching again. Under casual mode, leaving is fast and cheap. Players optimize for better matches immediately. Losing? Just re-queue until you have a winning team. Join at the end of a game? Just re-queue again. Mastercoms sees the lack of efficient player coordination as a problem with quick play that cannot be realistically solved. But this assumes that quick play was ever trying to function as a centralized coordination system in the first place. It never was. Quick play was never designed to behave like an airport, efficiently routing passengers from terminal to terminal. It was designed to be more like a town square, where players can congregate and gradually fill places that have activity. Town squares aren't supposed to be shuttling people in and out as fast as possible. They thrive when people stick around and establish themselves, and they improve when people recognize each other and linger. The truth is that casual and quick play ultimately succeed at different things. From the perspective of a software engineer like Mastercoms, efficiency is always better, but it's completely backwards to see it as a problem that a town square isn't exactly like an airport. If efficiency increases but stability decreases, players become match shoppers rather than server regulars, and the games themselves become disposable. If centralized global coordination is as important as Mastercoms insists it is in this post, you would expect to see that sentiment at least partially reflected in the reaction towards its first introduction in 2016. But it's common knowledge that the casual matchmaking system came as a massive, disappointing surprise for everybody involved. There was no demand for centralized matchmaking to begin with. The only support you saw after the fact for casual matchmaking was from figures like Uncle Dane, who thought it would be the key to onboarding the broader player base over to competitive mode. And we all know how that turned out. Despite what Mastercoms insinuates, the game was much bigger 10 years ago than it is now. If quick play were truly capable of producing stable and enjoyable games, it's difficult to explain how the game functioned so successfully during that period. If a movement for a reversion to Team Fortress 2 can get as much momentum as it has in 2026, then it would make sense to see similar momentum historically behind the implementation of a centralized matchmaking system. And yet even to this day, the closest you'll get to people supporting casual mode is expressed in apathy and doomerism. Finally, let's take a closer look at the final prong of Mastercoms' argument, because I think there's something hidden inside the sentiment that I don't even think Mastercoms is clued in on. While she expresses the conclusion in hopeful terms, look at what she's advocating for: a hybrid system, casual 2.0, with incrementally introduced quick play features. This post presents itself as encouraging creativity, but it effectively tries to restrict discussion to speculative variations on the status quo. It never seriously entertains the possibility that the structure itself, casual matchmaking, the structure designed to change the game fundamentally, might have changed it for the worse. The conclusion is doing three things. First, it's a blatant case of status quo bias. The only options Mastercoms lets stay on the table are partial concessions, incremental reform, and speculative future improvements to the existing matchmaking system. I talked about a similar case in my last video, where I show how Lanquidor's proposed solution effectively amounted to preserving the status quo, because quick play features have been gradually added into the game since launch. Mastercoms, whether she realized it or not, is doing much of the same here. The difference is that she places more hope in the possibility that the existing system can eventually be fixed. Second, it risks falling into what's called a Nirvana fallacy. A Nirvana fallacy occurs when someone rejects a real-world solution because it is imperfect while comparing it to an idealized alternative. In this case, Quick Play, a historical system that has demonstrably worked, is rejected because it cannot perfectly coordinate players globally, while matchmaking coordination is treated as an abstract ideal that will supposedly produce better games. But no system is perfect. The real question is not which system is theoretically cleaner, but which system produces the best experience in practice. What remains to be seen is any clear justification for why the many problems introduced by casual mode are worth preserving in exchange for the supposed benefits of centralized coordination. Third, it fundamentally misunderstands what people in this conversation actually care about. And this is why I believe the reaction to it was so lukewarm. Bring Back Quick Play is a movement and a discussion that's focused on asking for concrete historical goods, stuff like map timers, or vote scrambles, or team switching, or ad hoc connections. Real tangible things. Mastercoms instead attempts to shift the discussion towards abstract metrics like algorithmic coordination and infrastructure efficiency. But despite what she says, the rule set does matter here. The game coordinator conditions the rule set, and the rule set itself was redesigned to accommodate the matchmaking system. That's why you can't have ad hoc connections anymore, and that's why you can't have team switching. It would require an overhaul of the slot reservation system. In the end, the argument depends on assumptions that are never demonstrated. Quick Play's inability to perfectly coordinate players across the entire game is treated as a fatal flaw, even though that was never the role Quick Play was meant to fill. Quick Play was not designed to function like a centralized matchmaking system. It was designed as an option to seed servers and allow players themselves to stabilize the ecosystem. Mastercoms is focused on making an efficient machine, while people who support the version of Quick Play are in favor of more or less ditching the machine by putting agency and options back into players' hands. Judging Quick Play by the standards of centralized matchmaking misunderstands the problem entirely. The real question is which system reliably produces stable, enjoyable games. And for many players, the answer to that question was already demonstrated long before 2016. I want to thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, leave a comment and tell me what you think about it. If you have anything you want me to cover or talk about further, whether it's about TF2 or Quick Play or anything else, please let me know. I plan on making more videos about this stuff, and then some other topics I happen to be interested in. So if you enjoy, make sure to like this video and subscribe. So, bye-bye.